Right now, inside a maximum security prison in Tennessee, a condemned woman is fighting for the right to be hanged. Not fighting to avoid execution, fighting for a specific, particular way to die. A method this country hasn't used in 30 years. A method most of us associate with black and white photographs and public town squares. Not the year 2026. Her name is Christa Pike. She is the only woman on death row in the state of Tennessee, and on September 30th, 2026, the state plans to kill her. That date isn't a rumor, and it isn't speculation. It's a standing court order, filed and active right now, counting down like a clock. Nobody in this story gets to pause. So here's the question that should stop you mid-scroll. Why would anyone beg to die by a rope and a gallows instead of what we've all been told is the most humane execution method science has ever produced, a needle and a quiet drift into sleep? Unless that's not actually what happens. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why Christa Pike's lawyers stood in a Tennessee courtroom this month and asked a judge to let their client hang, and why the medical experts testifying under oath are backing them up. Before we get into the how, you need to understand the who. And I'll say up front, this is not a clean story. Christa Pike is not a sympathetic victim of circumstance, and this isn't a wrongful conviction case. What happened in the woods outside Knoxville in January of 1995 is one of the most disturbing crimes in Tennessee history, and nothing you're about to hear is designed to talk you out of that. But what's happening to her right now, in a courtroom, this month, in real time, raises questions that go far beyond one woman's guilt. Questions about whether the state's execution method is actually safe to use on anyone. Questions that already blew up in Tennessee's face once this year, on a different inmate, in a scene so disturbing that the attorney who witnessed it is still talking about it publicly. We'll get there. First, rewind with me to 1995. Who is Christa Pike? In January of 1995, Colleen Slemmer was 19 years old, from Florida, and enrolled at the Knoxville Job Corps Center, a federal program built to give young people, many from difficult backgrounds, a shot at an education and a trade. By every account, she was trying to build herself a future. Also enrolled at that same center, 18-year-old Christa Gale Pike. Christa was dating another Job Corps student, 17-year-old Tadaryl Shipp, and in the weeks before that January night, she became convinced Colleen was trying to take him from her. On the evening of January 12th, Christa, Tadaryl, and a third classmate, 18-year-old Shadolla Peterson, invited Colleen to walk with them toward the University of Tennessee's agricultural campus. The story was simple. They were going to smoke a little weed in the woods. Colleen went along. She never came back. What happened over the next 30 minutes to an hour, near an abandoned steam plant in the dark, is hard to describe without flinching, so I'll give you the shape of it, rather than every detail. Colleen was attacked, cut, and beaten. She tried to run. She was caught and dragged back. Symbols connected to an interest in the occult that Christa and Tadaryl shared were carved into her body. She was struck, fatally, with a chunk of asphalt torn up from the ground. A university groundskeeper found her body the next morning. Police didn't have to work hard for a confession. Christa hadn't just failed to hide what she'd done. She'd shown classmates back at the dorm a piece of bone, calling it a souvenir. When detectives told her that Shadolla had already turned on her and Tadaryl, Christa confessed in detail. In 1996, a jury convicted Christa Pike and sentenced her to death. She was 18 at the time of the murder, 20 at sentencing, and in that moment, she became the youngest woman sentenced to death anywhere in the United States since the modern death penalty was reinstated in 1972. Tadaryl Shipp was convicted too, but as a minor on the night of the crime, he received a lighter sentence, life, with the possibility of parole. He was denied parole as recently as October 2025. His next shot isn't until 2031. Shadolla Peterson, who went along that night and later testified against the other two, walked away with probation. Same night, same victim, 3 wildly different outcomes. Hold on to that thought. it's going to matter again later. For most of the next 3 decades, Christa Pike lived in solitary confinement as the only woman on Tennessee's death row, in a cell her own attorney has compared to the size of a parking space. And in a detail almost nobody remembers today, back in 2001 and again in 2002, against her lawyer's advice, Christa herself asked the courts to drop her appeals. She volunteered to be executed, not by injection, but by the electric chair. A judge actually granted it. An execution date was set, August 19, 2002. She changed her mind weeks before that date. Her attorneys scrambled, an appeals court intervened, and the execution never happened. As I'm recording this, it's the 24th anniversary of that canceled date, which means Christa Pike has now stared down her own death, in one form or another, for most of her adult life. And in a matter of weeks, September 30th, 2026, it's scheduled to actually happen, unless something changes. Before we jump forward to today, I want to say this directly to you. Cases like this move fast, and they move quietly. Court orders get filed on a random Tuesday afternoon and barely make a headline outside East Tennessee. If you want to actually track where this goes, whether Christa Pike is executed on schedule, whether a court intervenes, whether the method itself changes, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. I'd bet most people watching this video had no idea this case even existed 20 minutes ago. Let's fix that. Okay, fast forward to today. On September 30th, 2025, exactly 1 year before her scheduled execution, the Tennessee Supreme Court quietly set that date, one of 4 death warrants signed in a single batch that day. For most of the 4 people on that list, it was just the next grim procedural step. But for Christa Pike, it meant something historic. If this execution happens, she becomes the first woman executed by the state of Tennessee in more than 200 years. The last one was in 1819. Her attorneys didn't take that quietly. On January 8, 2026, they filed a lawsuit in Davidson County Chancery Court, not arguing she's innocent, not relitigating her guilt, but attacking the method the state plans to use to kill her. Here's what most people think they know about lethal injection. A needle goes into a vein, a drug flows in, and within moments, the person drifts off, unconscious, then gone. Peaceful, clinical, the humane successor to the electric chair, the gas chamber, the firing squad, the noose. That's the pitch that's been sold to the American public for 50 straight years. Tennessee's current protocol, in place since December 2024, uses a single massive dose of one drug to do it, pentobarbital. It replaced the 3-drug combination the state used between 2018 and 2020. It's now the go-to method in most death penalty states. Here's what Christa Pike's lawyers and the medical experts they've put on the stand say actually happens. Pentobarbital, at execution concentration, isn't a gentle sedative. It's corrosive. Corrosive enough that one expert compared it directly to drain cleaner. If it goes exactly where it's supposed to, straight into a healthy, cooperative vein, the drug does its job, brutally but fast. But if the placement fails, if a vein collapses, if the needle misses, if the catheter clots, and the drug backs up into surrounding tissue instead of the bloodstream, a complication doctors call extravasation, it doesn't fail quietly, it burns. Living tissue from the inside. And there's a second mechanism buried in the filing, darker still. Pentobarbital can trigger something called flash pulmonary edema, a sudden, violent flooding of the lungs with fluid. Medical experts testifying on Pike's behalf describe it as producing a genuine sensation of drowning combined with chemical burning, while the person is still conscious enough to feel every second of it. Pike's own legal filing doesn't dress that up in soft language. It states, in plain terms, that what she's facing amounts to death by drowning on her own blood. Sit with that contrast for a second. Peaceful needle, humane method. Now picture burning and drowning simultaneously, aware the entire way through. And here's why Christa Pike specifically is at the center of this fight, rather than any of the dozens of other people on death rows around the country. Her own body may be a worst-case scenario for exactly that failure mode. The original January lawsuit also raised something else almost nobody's talking about: religion. Pike says she practices Buddhism, and that Tennessee's protocol, which cuts off contact with a spiritual advisor for the final 12 hours before execution and may bar that advisor from the death chamber entirely, violates her First Amendment rights. Her attorneys point out that 3 men executed in Tennessee in 2025 were all granted exceptions to that exact blackout rule. She's asking why she wouldn't get the same. The lawsuit also demands an on-site emergency medical contingency plan in case the execution goes wrong mid-procedure, because right now, astonishingly, there isn't one. The thrombocytosis problem. Christa Pike has a blood disorder called essential thrombocytosis. In plain terms, her blood contains an abnormally high number of platelets, the cells responsible for clotting. You'd think extra clotting power would be a good thing right before a needle goes into someone's arm. It isn't. Doctors testifying in her case describe it as a paradox with 2 exits, and both of them are bad. Too many platelets can mean the blood clots inside the IV line itself, clogging the catheter before a full dose is delivered, which could force the execution team to start over, again, hunting for a fresh vein each time. Or, the opposite failure mode kicks in. The clotting system misfires, and instead of a controlled process, you get uncontrolled bleeding. Layer onto that blood disorder what court filings describe as small, fragile, difficult-to-access veins, combined, per testimony from a board-certified anesthesiologist, with additional risk from her weight, and you get a patient where even a routine blood draw can be a struggle, let alone a rigid, irreversible protocol using a corrosive chemical with 0 room for error. Her own medical experts told a judge, under oath, this month, that placing a working IV line in Christa Pike's arm might not be the routine 15-second procedure it's supposed to be. It could turn into something prolonged, something visibly, audibly painful, playing out in front of official witnesses. Tennessee disagrees. Their own witness told the court, bluntly, that Pike is a standard patient with accessible veins, and that there's no real evidence anything would go wrong. So who's right? Is this a genuine, physiological ticking time bomb, or a savvy legal strategy dressed in medical vocabulary, buying a condemned woman a few extra months on Earth? Here's the thing. Tennessee didn't have to speculate about what happens when this exact protocol meets a genuinely difficult vein. They already ran that experiment. 4 months before Christa Pike's hearing even started, the state tried it on someone else. And it went about as badly as an execution can go without technically becoming a second homicide. However, and this is where the story turns, while the state of Tennessee insists, on paper, in court, under oath, that its protocol is safe, standard, and humane, Christa Pike's own legal team has proposed something no state has actually carried out in almost 30 years. Something that hasn't been used to execute a single person anywhere in this country since 1996. They are formally asking Tennessee to hang her, not as some symbolic protest, as a serious legal request, sitting in front of a judge right now, backed by expert testimony, and citing by name the exact nightmare scenario that played out 4 months earlier in a different execution chamber, less than an hour down the road. If you're wondering how use a rope instead of a needle became a legitimate courtroom argument in the year 2026, stay with me. Because to understand that, you first need to understand what happened to a man named Tony Carruthers. Tony Carruthers, the proof. On May 21, 2026, Tennessee scheduled the execution of 57-year-old Tony Carruthers, convicted decades earlier in the kidnapping and murder of 3 people, a case his own attorneys have long argued was built on jailhouse informant testimony with no physical evidence attached. His guilt is a separate, contested story. What matters for our purposes is only what happened once the execution actually began, because it is arguably the single most important piece of evidence in Christa Pike's entire case. The execution was already delayed that morning while lawyers waited on the U.S. Supreme Court to rule on an emergency stay request. The High Court refused it. The execution was cleared to proceed, and then it fell apart. Executioners quickly placed one IV line. Protocol requires a second, backup line as a safeguard for exactly this kind of complication. They could not place it, not on the first try, not after many tries. For over an hour, the execution team searched Tony Carruthers' body for a usable vein. When that failed, they attempted something more invasive, a central line threaded deep into a major vessel near the chest. According to an emergency court filing, the person attempting that procedure was not qualified to perform it. That attempt failed too. Maria Deliberato, an ACLU attorney representing Carruthers, was inside the room. She later described watching officials struggling to find a vein while Carruthers was left wincing and groaning, calling the entire scene one of the worst things she's witnessed professionally. Testifying afterward in Christa Pike's own hearing, Deliberato described an execution team dressed like a tactical unit, forcibly pulling Carruthers from his cell and strapping him to the gurney before any of this even started. According to his legal team, in the course of hunting for a vein, Carruthers was punctured more than a dozen separate times. After more than an hour, the state gave up. The execution was called off. Governor Bill Lee granted Tony Carruthers a 1-year stay, which means, as of right now, he is still alive. His death sentence isn't canceled, it's postponed. Sit with that for a second. This isn't a hypothetical dreamed up by a defense attorney trying to run out the clock. This isn't fear-mongering. This happened in Tennessee this year under the exact same execution protocol Christa Pike is scheduled to face, 4 months before her legal team's hearing even opened. And it isn't an isolated glitch for this state either. Rewind to 2022. Tennessee suspended executions entirely for 3 years after an independent investigation found the Department of Correction wasn't even properly testing its lethal injection drugs for purity and potency, meaning for years, nobody could say with certainty what was actually going into condemned inmates' veins. Executions only resumed in 2025. Worth noting, for balance, less than 3 months after the Carruthers disaster, Tennessee successfully executed a different man, Anthony Hines, exactly on schedule, on August 13th. So, this protocol doesn't always fail. Sometimes it works exactly as designed, which, if you think about it for more than a few seconds, is arguably the most unsettling part of all of it. Whether this method causes a fast, controlled death or a prolonged, botched one might genuinely come down to the specific geometry of one person's veins on one particular morning. That's not an abstraction for Christa Pike. According to the doctors who've examined her, it's her actual medical file. So when Pike's attorneys filed an emergency motion in June 2026, just weeks after Carruthers, demanding a special hearing into whether this protocol could be safely used on their client, they weren't inventing a crisis out of thin air. They were pointing at a fresh, thoroughly witnessed disaster and saying, "This is what you're risking with our client." Now imagine trying it on a woman whose own doctors call her veins fragile, sitting on top of a blood disorder that can go wrong in 2 different directions at once. Quick pause, because I need to know I'm not the only one who found that disturbing. If what happened to Tony Carruthers made your stomach turn a little, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this kind of reporting reach people who have no idea any of this is unfolding this month in an American courtroom. Okay, deep breath, because we need to go back to Christa Pike's hearing and see exactly what her lawyers built with this evidence. In a rare move, the Tennessee Supreme Court didn't just let Pike's lawsuit sit in the ordinary court queue. They appointed a special master, a semi-retired judge named W. Mark Ward, with one job: gather the evidence and report back on whether executing this specific woman under this specific protocol crosses the line into cruel and unusual punishment. It's the first case ever to proceed under a newly amended Tennessee Supreme Court rule built specifically to allow this kind of review. Tennessee's court system, in other words, had to write new procedure just to handle what Pike's case was asking of it. The hearing opened August 11th in a Knoxville courtroom and ran for multiple days. Judge Ward laid out the scope immediately. This wasn't a retrial. Her guilt was not on the table, ever. What was on the table were narrow, clinical, brutal questions. Can the state safely establish IV access given her blood disorder and her veins? Does forcing an all-male team to physically extract her from her cell and strap her down, given a documented history of surviving sexual violence from at least 6 different people across her childhood and adolescence, inflict its own independent form of cruelty? Should she get a central line instead of a standard IV? And the question that made national headlines, should she be allowed to choose hanging? Over multiple days, Pike's team called an anesthesiologist, a trauma psychologist, and Maria Deliberato, the attorney who watched the Carruthers execution collapse in real time, to build the case point by point. A clinical psychologist described Pike surviving abuse that began, in her account, before Pike was even out of preschool. The state pushed back hard on almost all of it, though not on every point. Partway through the hearing, the state actually conceded ground on the religious question, agreeing Pike's Buddhist advisor could have some access she'd originally been denied. But on the core medical claims, the state held firm. Their attorney didn't deny Pike's traumatic history. He told the court, in effect, that everyone in the room wished those things had never happened to her. But sympathy, he argued, isn't the constitutional standard. The 8th Amendment doesn't require a painless execution or general anesthesia, only that the state avoid deliberately inflicting needless suffering. Their own medical witness reviewed her file and testified she's a standard patient with accessible veins, nothing that should meaningfully complicate a routine IV placement. 2 completely different medical pictures of the same body, sworn to under oath in the same courtroom, days apart. Here's a detail people miss. Judge Ward doesn't decide Christa Pike's fate. He can't order the state to hang her, can't grant a stay, can't move the execution date by a single day. All he does is compile the facts and send them up the chain. His written findings are due to the Tennessee Supreme Court by August 21st. Both sides then have until August 28th to file objections. After that, the Tennessee Supreme Court, the same court that set the September 30th date in the first place, takes the full record and makes the actual final call. Which means, depending on exactly when you're watching this video, we may already know the answer to the question in this video's title. Or we may still be waiting, right alongside Christa Pike, as the calendar keeps sliding toward the last day of September. And that uncertainty is exactly why I want to ask you for something small, right now, while it's on your mind. This could resolve any day. As I'm recording this, we could be less than 72 hours from Judge Ward's findings going public. Whatever happens next, a stay, a hanging granted, the date locked in as is, we're covering it the moment it breaks in a full follow-up. The only way you actually see that video when it drops is if you're subscribed with notifications on. Takes 2 seconds. Let's keep going, because there's one more piece of this you need to hear. Because in a case this legally complicated, this focused on protocols, platelets, and constitutional standards, it's dangerously easy to lose sight of the person this all started with. Colleen Slemmer was 19. She was from Florida. People who knew her described someone genuinely trying to build something for herself inside a program meant to give struggling teenagers a second chance. She had a mother, May Martinez, who has now spent more than 30 years without her daughter, and who, as recently as last October, wasn't even proactively notified by the state when her daughter's killer's boyfriend came up for his first parole hearing. A local reporter had to tell her, 3 decades on, and the system still isn't built around the people left behind. Nothing in this video is asking you to forget that. Whatever you land on regarding Pike's medical claims, the constitutionality of Tennessee's protocol, or whether a rope is somehow more humane than a needle, none of it erases what happened to Colleen Slemmer in those woods, or the decades of grief that followed for the people who loved her. And it's worth sitting one more time with the disparity we flagged earlier. 3 teenagers walked into those woods as participants in the same killing. One got probation, one is serving life, denied parole once, eligible again in 2031. One, the only one who happened to be 18 instead of 17 that night, is now weeks from a scheduled execution. Is that proportional justice? Or is it proof of exactly how arbitrary the American death penalty can be, even within a single crime, on a single night, among people who did it together? I'm not going to pretend that question has a clean answer. It's bigger than one video, but it's the question hanging quietly over everything else you've just heard. So where does this actually leave us? Right now, September 30th, 2026, remains the legally operative execution date. Nothing has changed that yet. Judge Ward's findings, due any day, don't overturn it by themselves. They're a recommendation, not a ruling. The Tennessee Supreme Court, the same body that set this date nearly a year in advance, holds the only pen that can erase it, delay it, or change how it's carried out. If the court sides with the state, Christa Pike very likely becomes the first woman executed in Tennessee since 1819, put to death by the same single drug protocol that failed catastrophically on Tony Carruthers months earlier, with her legal team's warnings about clotting, burning, and drowning still sitting in the record, unresolved. If the court sides with Pike's team on the medical questions, Tennessee will have to either fundamentally change how it carries out this specific execution, or, the most historic outcome on the table, actually grant a condemned inmate's request to die by hanging. Something no American jurisdiction has carried out since a rope was used in Delaware back in 1996. It wouldn't just decide Christa Pike's fate, it would become the case every other death row attorney in America starts citing before the ink is even dry. Either way, the countdown doesn't pause for the legal process. Opponents of her execution have already scheduled a public rally for September 27th, 3 days ahead of the warrant date, and are asking churches across Tennessee to toll their bells for 2 full minutes at 10 a.m. on September 30th itself, whether or not the execution happens that morning. Christa Pike has now spent more of her life on death row than she ever spent free. She's already survived 1 canceled execution date, back in 2002. Whether she survives this one comes down to decisions being made, right now, by people most of us will never know by name. A special master finishing a report, a handful of state Supreme Court justices reading it, and a governor holding the power to intervene, with no public sign yet of which way he's leaning. One brutal night in January of 1995 set all of this in motion. Whether it ends with a lethal injection, a rope, or a stay of execution nobody's expecting, we're going to find out together, probably soon. If this case has actually gripped you the way it gripped me putting this together, do 2 things. First, subscribe. I'm not walking away from this story on September 30th, whichever way it goes. Second, drop a comment with one word, needle or rope. I'm genuinely curious whether, after everything you just heard about pentobarbital, flash pulmonary edema, and what happened to Tony Carruthers, your gut instinct changed at all by the end of this video. I'll be reading them. Christa Pike was 18 when she brought a chunk of asphalt down on Colleen Slemmer's skull. She's 49 now. In the 3 decades between, she's become, depending entirely on who you ask, a killer exactly where she belongs. A severely mentally ill trauma survivor, the system failed twice, once as a child, once as a defendant, or simply a name on a death warrant with an expiration date 6 weeks out. Maybe she's some combination of all 3. The court doesn't have to settle that question. It only has to decide how. Needle or rope. Burning and drowning, or a method this country hasn't used since the mid-1990s. September 30th is coming either way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And if there's a ruling on Christa Pike's case before then, you'll be the first to know.